Hi, this is Larry Johnson, and this is another in my video blog series on improving organizational culture. Today, I want to talk about non-performance. I came across an article in the Harvard Business Review. Actually, I subscribe to it, and so I get the Harvard Business Review management tips of the day, kind of like the tips I send out to you, and Harvard does the same thing. And this one was really fascinating. It's from How to Talk to an Employee Who Isn't Meeting Their Goals by Sabina Nawaz. And thought she had a brilliant idea here that I'm going to incorporate into my training and how I teach people to work with difficult people or people who aren't performing. Rather than just starting off and saying, hey, I've got a problem here and it needs to get resolved, you might want to try asking the employee to evaluate his or her own performance. In other words, how you doing? How do you think you're doing? Now, I sometimes facetiously call this the backdoor approach. How do you think you're doing? Well, I'm doing great. Well, actually, you suck. So it can be perceived as being kind of sneaky. On the other hand, it does give you an opportunity to see the problem in the way the employee perceives it. And it kind of gives you a format for addressing whatever the issues are that are keeping this employee from performing the way you want them to perform. Now, I think it's really important if you're going to do this and take this approach that you do what I call earn yourself a hearing. In other words, you have to sort of earn the privilege of them taking you seriously. And you say, well, I'm their boss, they ought to take me seriously. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. They will take you seriously when they know you take them seriously. Because there's that old axiom that says what goes around comes around. And so if you ask somebody, how do you think you're doing, or please evaluate your job to this point from your perspective, then it's really important that you closely listen to them. And here's 3 steps to help you do that. First of all, engage. And I'm talking about eye contact. I'm talking about leaning forward. I'm talking about putting your phone down, not working on your desktop, but really engaging with the person so that they know that you're listening to them. Then paraphrase what they tell you, repeat it back to them in another format. For example, they may say, well, I think I'm meeting all the goals that I'm expected to meet, and I'm meeting them with no problem here. I think I'm doing pretty good. And so you can then rephrase that, and it's important that you don't do it facetiously. You don't say, well, you think you're doing good, well, give me a break, buddy. No, you say, okay, so you see you're meeting your goals. All right. Okay. And empathize. In other words, rephrase to them how you think they're feeling, so you feel pretty good about what you're doing. Now, my guess is that when you ask employees who are not performing how they think they're doing, they're probably going to be honest, sometimes to a fault, but sometimes partially, about the problem. They may say, well, I know I've had trouble meeting that sales goal, but I'm working on it, and I've got this one client who maybe is going to come through. Well, whatever they tell you, you just paraphrase it back and say, so you got somebody on the line coming through, right? And you feel like this is going to be a workout, okay? Now, by doing that, you demonstrate that you're really listening to the person, and that earns yourself a hearing so that you now can share your concerns. So I like to follow this conversational roadmap to do that. First of all, number 1, you ask them to evaluate their performance. And then number 2, you earn yourself a hearing, like I just said. And then number 3, describe the problem specifically. Well, the problem from my perspective, George, is that there still isn't a closed deal here. And the deadline on that was last week. And when we let these deadlines slip, we fall behind the whole production schedule, and we can't move on. So it really puts us all in a bind. See how I've now described why I'm concerned and what the issue is. Then the next step is to explain my concern, which I just did, and then clarify the bottom line. And this is real important to let them know what's the non-negotiable here. George, this has to get turned around. I realize you've got several things in the fire, and that it looks like several things are going to close. That's great. The bottom line is something has to close, and it has to close by Thursday. Now, that requires that you think about what that bottom line is before you have this conversation. Just like in describing the problem specifically, you need to think about that as well. And it has to be in specific terms. It's not just that you're not working hard enough, but I need this done by this date. And it hasn't been done by this date so far. Agree for and ask for a solution. So, George, have you got any ideas on how to get this resolved so that we can move ahead? Describe the consequences of continued non-performance. This is kind of going beyond the bottom line to say, and I wouldn't do this with every conversation. If you're just having a quick conversation with somebody about a problem, that's okay. But if this is the second time you've talked to them about it, then you need to think about consequences and let them know what those are, whether it's changing their working hours or cutting back on their territory, or or writing them up and sending them to HR purgatory, or letting them go. Those are consequences of not performance in any job, or at least it should be. And then express your confidence in the employee. Now, this is important psychologically. It's called the Pygmalion effect, based on the myth of Pygmalion, who was a Greek myth character who sculpted a statue of a beautiful woman, Galatea was her name, and he fell in love with his own statue, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love, brought the statue to life, and so Pygmalion should have been real happy. This is kind of Pinocchio with erotic overtones, but it turns out to be a tragedy, because after a while, Pygmalion can't handle a real woman, wants his statue back. But the whole idea is that when you have high expectations of somebody, you tend to get high results. If you have low expectations of someone, you get low results. So I think it's real important to express your confidence that the employee can get this turned around. And then follow up. Always follow up and to make sure that the problem got resolved. And if it didn't, to have another conversation with the employee to move this further along. Okay. This is Larry Johnson, and this is another in my vlogs on how to improve corporate culture. You can reach me by calling 800, hey, toll free, 759-4933. Or you can email me, Larry, at larry-johnson.com. And I'll try to answer your questions. Be sure to go on to my website and sign up for my newsletter, my e-zine, if you haven't done so. It's called Tips for Today's Managers. And guess what? It is absolutely free. Talk to you next time. Thanks.